So, the beginning of chapter 4 talks about how different society evolve and transition from one form to another. And this won't be on your midterm, but it's good to know. So, first we have the hunter-gatherer society. And this society, things were a lot simpler. People hunt animals and people forage on any plants they could find as their food sources. And when the plants are gone, or when all the animals are gone, they move to another place. So, as you can see, people living in hunter-gatherer society did not know how to convert from one form of resource to another. And then people got a bit better when it transitioned to pastoral society. And in pastoral society, people learn how to domesticate animals. But during this time, they only domesticated animals on a very small scale, not like the horticultural society. In horticultural society, they learn how to domesticate animals on the larger scale, and they also learn how to plant stuff on a much larger capacity. And they know where is the best place to domesticate animals and to plant stuff. Oh, you have to be close to the rainfall and stuff. So people were a bit wiser during this time compared to people living during the pastoral times. And then we have the famous agricultural revolution. It was before industrial revolution, and people learn about mass production, more advanced techniques to domesticate animals during this time. And you can read that on your own. And people also learn how to diversify their crops and to let the soil rest for a while. People got all these notions during agricultural society compared to horticultural society. They learned something about rainfall during this time, but during pastoral society, when they realized maybe the soil ceased to produce as much as they wanted to, they moved to another place and plant. Or they moved to another place to domesticate animals. So people were less wise, we can say that, during pastoral or horticultural times. But after the agricultural revolution, people got the notion how to fertilize their soil and why it's important to let the soil rest for a while and how to rotate among different plants in different soil. So this is how societies evolve. I'm sure you learned that in some of your other classes. But in this society, hunter-gatherers, pastoral, horticultural, or even agricultural society, things were more or less equal. There were not much hierarchies during these times. But maybe apparently, some vanguards or pioneers, maybe during the agricultural society, maybe things were more advanced, not only in terms of how to rotate their soil, how to fertilize their soil, how to diverse their crops, better ways to domesticate animals. People also figure out other things. Oh, maybe we should have some kind of a classification system where they are the knights, the king, the nobles, and the peasants with different roles and responsibilities. Because of that, society transitioned from agricultural to a feudalistic society when people invented quote-unquote hierarchies. I think we can say that this transition, or almost the same transition, took place in other parts of the world, in other continents, in countries located in other continents. They move from this phase to this and to this and to this, and then they have a feudalism. Many countries like China or Japan, or many countries in the African continents, they move from all these phases, and at some point they had a feudalistic system. The hierarchies may differ from societies to societies in different parts of the world, but we can more or less say that all places in the world, when they advance, they move through this phase. They evolve from one type of society to another. And after that, people invented machines, all kinds of sophisticated infrastructure. There were medical healthcare advancement. There were all kinds of new gadgets. There were steam engines. And people learned how to make use of new types of energy. And because of that, society evolved one more time from a feudalistic society to an industrial society. All these were classified as pre-industrial society, the hunter-gatherer society, the pastoral society, the horticultural society, the agricultural society, and the feudalistic societies were classified as pre-industrial societies because they occur before technological advancement, before the inventions of all this infrastructure and gadgets. Are we clear? So, when people realized how to make use of all these new forms of energy, when they invented more infrastructure, technologies, and so on and so forth, society evolved. And this was a very big transition from a feudalistic society to an industrial society when industrial revolution happened. There was a big or mass transition. People, during this transition, they also realized the feudalistic hierarchies cannot serve the needs with the advent of all these new forms of energy sources being discovered. They cannot meet the needs of all this new technology, the new factories, the new infrastructure. So it gave rise to a whole new society, the industrial society. And people gradually replaced the feudalistic hierarchies and the feudalistic economic production system with the capitalism system. It occurs during industrial society. Question so far? And because of all these gadgets, machines, infrastructure, technology being invented, and the discovery of how to make good use of different energy sources, because of that, the aristocracy in the feudalistic society lose power, they lose influence. They could no longer control people as they used to be. When people, they invent all these new gadgets, technology, infrastructure to make their lives better. It's also mentioned in the last paragraph of this page. So, as we can see, they were revolutions. The biggest one was the French Revolution, to maybe minimize or even to replace altogether the influence or power or prominent roles of these aristocracies in many parts of Europe, right? So this was a big transformation. That's why it was categorized under a new category. And after that, we had another transition. So, during industrial societies, manufacturing forms the basis of a country, a society, a city, a town's economic base. Detroit back then, decades ago in Detroit, there were many factories in Detroit, in Chicago, certain parts of Chicago, or certain parts of Pennsylvania. The steel industry was prominent in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. But now it ceased to be so. All these car manufacturers or other types of factories that make soap, factories that make electronics, factories that make cars and other things, they realize, or the owners of these factories, they realize as our employees or the workers in the assembly plant, when they got more and more educated, because mind you, new forms of education, new forms of school system took place during industrial society. They replaced the school system of the feudal society. So all these new forms of education, like many of the newer schools, the UC systems, many of the UC schools, many of the California state systems, Arizona state, many of the new state schools, they provide a different kinds of training to students, and eventually these students become the workforce in all these manufacturing plants. So all this happens in tandem, advancement in education system, which led to economic growth and development and prosperity. And at the same time, manufacturing sectors develop and advance as well. Up to a certain point, factory owners figure, yeah, now our workforce were getting more and more educated, maybe more and more skillful as well. And because of that, we need to pay them more. But sometimes, maybe it's too costly for us. Or sometimes, the scope of our work does not require people with that level of education or that kind of expertise. We can still somehow make use of the old way of doing things. Let's relocate our factory. That was what happened. During the late 70s to the early 90s in parts of Chicago, in Detroit, in certain parts of Pennsylvania, and in other manufacturing towns and cities in the US, they relocated their plants to Asian countries because the overhead cost was relatively lower. The labor costs were also relatively lower. And I told you, many countries in this world, they went through this phase. It's not only limited to Europe or to the US. It happened in Japan as well. It happened in Taiwan as well. It happened in South Korea as well. Factory owners in all these countries, at some point during this phase, they realized that, oh, our labor is getting too expensive. Our overhead is getting too high. Let's relocate our plant to Latin American countries, to countries in some African continents, to some countries in Southeast Asia. That's what they did. And because of that, some of these societies that went through this transition at an earlier time, they went through another transition when factories move. They transitioned into the post-industrial society. Many countries, the US, countries in Europe, some countries in East Asia, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, they are currently in this phase, characterized as information society or post-industrial society. And some countries that went through or started this transition at a somewhat later time. They are still in this phase. There are some countries like Vietnam, Cambodia or Laos, or certain countries in Africa, or some countries in Latin America. They are still in this phase. And some of them have begun to transition into this phase as well. But many of the developed first world countries are already in this phase. And this is what characterized the post-industrial society. It's a more knowledge-based economy. And most of the jobs are service-oriented or has a heavy focus on knowledge-based, like many of your health profession or allied health professions, especially when population in these societies are aging. Now, there are so many specialties within healthcare, and they render different service to cater for the different needs of the different population. You have different kinds of nurses, different kinds of specialists, different occupations within allied health and whatnot. And when we have an issue with a product or a service, we call a number, right? It's usually a free number. Sometimes the person who picked up the phone, sometimes they are from the US, sometimes they are not. So this is another characteristics of a post-industrial society, or we also call that information society. Now, we don't have to go to the store. We just go to the internet and sometimes a chat box pops up. We can just type in our issues or question. It's more service-oriented. It's more knowledge-based, as you can see. And now, we all know YouTubers, they can almost be considered a legit or an official occupation. It's okay to be a YouTuber. So, what do YouTubers do? What kind of videos do they post? What do YouTubers do?
Entertainment.
Yeah, entertainment. Most of their videos are to entertain people, to spice up people's boring and busy life, to help people relax. And there are different kinds of videos that falls under the entertainment category, right? And some educational videos, sometimes they are posted by people who have credentials, are also quite entertaining. They use all the more sophisticated technologies, infrastructure, or software to produce their video, like the Khan Academy to teach people math, all kinds of math and statistics. They are not like my boring video, right? And now it's easy to learn advanced math or advanced technique in statistics or other advanced topic through all these YouTube channels. And they can supplement textbooks, or they can even replace textbooks and even professors. And sometimes they make their videos entertaining. They put music, they put lyrics, and they tell jokes when they explain a difficult concept in math or in statistics or what else and whatnot, or in a programming language. You can just pause your video, open two screens, and look at how the syntax works in this screen and learn how to program in another screen. This is another characteristics of a post-industrial society. What else do YouTubers do? What kind of other videos do they post? Aside from entertainment videos, what kind of other videos do they post? Tutorials, informational, right? So, students from my later class, they told me the YouTube videos can be classified into two broad categories: tutorials / informational or entertainment. Sometimes they overlap, they cut across among one another is possible. So, nowadays, young people, maybe they don't really like to work at a corporation, at an organization for long periods of time. Sometimes after a few years, what they do, they resign if they are skillful enough. And what they do, and then they become YouTubers. I'm sure you've seen that, right? Some of these people used to be in HR, used to be in marketing, used to be a customer service rep. Many of them used to be in IT. Some of them are still statisticians or economists. They contribute their knowledge on YouTube to make extra money or just for informational sake. And there are a lot of nutritionists, nurses, physicians. They also have their own YouTube channel, informational channel. And at the same time, they are also quite entertaining. Depends on the personality of the YouTuber, right? To educate people about maybe different kinds of influenza, A, B, C, D, E, and what precautions you should take. Physicians do that quite a bit. Nurses do that too. Pharmacists have their own channels too. And we see when we want to buy a new product, and at that time, I was looking for a Mac because it's easier to program Python on a Mac compared to a PC. If I program Python on a PC, I need to open the DOS prompt. And then I need to open another IDE for Python. I write my syntax in that IDE. I go to the DOS prompt. I type in Python, the file name .py to run my programs. And if I get an error on my DOS prompt, I go back to the IDE. I go one line by line to check where did the error occur. Okay, I found it. Now I go back to my DOS prompt. I debug. It's quite cumbersome. So I was looking for a Mac within a reasonable price range. So what did I do? How did I do my research? I consult Dr. YouTube, and many people review different kinds of products on YouTube, right? So that's how I got my laptop. This is a used laptop. It's cheaper than my Dell at home, actually. And because of that, and I'm cheap, I buy this just because of Python programming. I did not buy the Mac version of Microsoft Office, so your videos look funny, and I don't care. Okay, let's go back one step further. Okay, what is the meaning of society? You can look on the board. Okay. Does this definition for society still apply in today's 21st century world? So, we can still have a definable community in many places to call a certain place society. And in many places, they still share the same culture. Do all places share the same culture in today's world? Do all towns and cities share the same culture? It's no longer the case, we all know. So, my students at the other session, they say, no, this definition needs to be broadened or extended or is outdated. Some say, now many places are diverse. And society is different from the word community. It's true if you ask Dr. Google. Society includes people who live in a specific location, a definable community, and is also characterized by the systems of social relationships in that community. So, if you ask Dr. Google, there's a distinction between the two words. Community is a group of people living in the same location. They don't mention interpersonal relationships. And what else? So, community is one kind of or a subset of society. Community is embedded within society. That's how they perceive students from my other session. So nowadays you have all kinds of social media, right? You have Instagram, you have Twitter, you have Facebook, you have LinkedIn. I don't know what else you have. Okay. Sometimes we join groups on Facebook, right? We can join groups on Facebook. We can also join groups on LinkedIn. It's a good idea to be on LinkedIn when you are on the job market before you graduate. There are many employers on LinkedIn. And your profile on LinkedIn can be more important than your paper resume sometimes. People check you out on LinkedIn when they are about to shortlist you, or when they see, oh, your resume looks interesting, they Google you. And you show up on all kinds of social media if you have one. So, based on what we see now, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and what else and what not, do you think this definition for society still apply? Would you consider your group on Facebook, your group, the group you join on LinkedIn, a community? At least a community, or even though you don't consider them a society, or you consider them a society because there are some kind of social relationships going on virtually. You comment on people's idea, suggestion, people's posts on that group, on Twitter. You retweeted somebody's post. And you follow people on Instagram because you are interested. Would you classify those social media mechanisms as another new kind of society? You retweet people's posts. You like people's posts on Twitter or Facebook. You commented on certain groups, on certain issues on Facebook. You have dating apps, Tinder. That's another community for people with a specific interest. Would you consider those societies? They are still some kind of social relationships embedded within all these virtual groups. Would you call these virtual groups communities, or would you call these virtual groups societies, new forms of societies? Any thoughts? Communities, yeah. So some people call them virtual communities. So just know that now this definition needs to be revised or broadened or extended because of the advent of internet and social media. This will not be on your exam, but it's good to know the meaning. Okay, questions so far? Okay, we talk about the main theoretical perspective on society during the first 2 weeks. And this chapter goes through this theory in depth again. According to Emile Durkheim, the pioneers of functionalism, we have order and stability in any society because of the collective conscience. People living in that society have a sense of collective conscience. You can read the meaning on your own. So, because of that, most societies to some degree have some sort of order and stability. People may not be completely happy with their government, their employers, or one another, their neighbors, their friends. But they don't always go on strike or fight against one another because of this notion, collective conscience. And aside from collective conscience, societies are also integrated. For the most part, societies have some kind of order and stability because of social integration. And social integration existed in agricultural traditional societies. We've been through this before. We call them mechanical solidarity. The kind of integration that glue traditional agricultural societies together is what we call mechanical society. Picture some of the old cowboy movies. Things were simpler. People's roles were fewer, less refined. Those societies are what we call mechanical solidarity. Those societies were somewhat integrated too. And after industrialization, when societies transition into the industrialized phase or the post-industrialized phase, we have something of what we call organic solidarity. When society transition from the pre-industrial phase to the industrial phase and the post-industrial phase, the nature of integration changes. There's still some kind of integration that holds society together, but the nature of integration change as society transition from pre-industrial phase to industrial and post-industrial phase. And because of that, the kind call these new kinds of integration organic solidarity. We have many kinds of accountants to cater for our different needs. We have tax accountants, we have fraud accountants, we have cost accountants, we have managerial accountants, we have auditors, and so on and so forth. We have financial planners to cater for people's different, distinct, and specific needs. We have different kinds of dentists, different kinds of nurses, even different kinds of YouTubers. And there are so many specialties within the IT department. We have different kinds of database experts. We have different kinds of programmers who have expertise in different programming language. This is what we mean by societies characterized by organic solidarity. In these societies, even though people's roles and responsibilities are more refined, there's still some kind of glue. We call that integration that holds society together. People playing different roles, having different responsibilities, can still coordinate and coexist in a given society. They don't always go to war, even though they don't always agree. And this is according to Durkheim because of organic solidarity. Are we clear? So, you also learn about conflict theory. Karl Marx was one of the pioneers of the conflict theory. And Marx, he lived during the time of Industrial Revolution. And his time, even though it was more advanced compared to the pre-industrial societies, but it wasn't as advanced as today's society. So maybe Karl Marx could not take an airplane to travel to other continents to observe. So that was what he observed, mainly the 19th century European societies and the factory plants. And when he looked at the factory plants, he realized there were two main classes of people: the proletariats, who work in all these factory assembly lines, or we call them the working class. They don't own anything, they work for people. And there's also another class. They live a different lifestyle, and he calls them the bourgeoisies. They own the factories, they own the machines, the assets in the factories, they own the buildings of the factories, they own the other infrastructure. Those are the bourgeoisies. So he realized society wasn't very fair. There were at least two main classes of people. They live vastly different lifestyles. And proponents of the conflict theory also believe that because we have limited resources, when energy is being converted to another energy to make things work, it takes time. And this is one manifestation of how resources are limited. The soil needs time to rest. The soil needs time to be fertilized. The soil needs time to rest. Even if we don't fertilize the soil needs to rest to replenish its nutrients. We cannot just keep planting and planting and planting on the same soil. It's going to affect the quantity of the food being produced. If we keep doing that, the soil did not get the chance to rest. It depletes all the nutrients. That's another manifestation of limited resource in any society. So because of that, people are constantly fighting for limited resources, according to conflict theories. Not everybody have access to these limited resources, and people are never on equal power basis. Some people are more powerful. Because of that, they can make use of their economic resources, their financial means to access all these limited resources. But not everybody can do that. Marx and other pioneers of the conflict theory realized that. And because of that, they believe that due to limited resources, conflict forms the basis of life in almost every society. That's the essence of the conflict theory. Go back to one of your older slides. You will realize we talked about this before. And during industrial society, capitalism was created or invented during industrialization, and Marx realized the limitations associated with the industrialized society. People are not equal. There are at least two classes of people because of the different power bases. Those who don't own anything, the working class, they only work for those who own everything. Things weren't that fair under capitalism. So, because of that, he wanted change. He said, maybe there are limitations associated with the capitalist system. Let's think of a new system. And he thought about replacing the communist system or the socialist system with the capitalist system that exists in many industrial societies in Europe. And because mass education, modern forms of education, happens during industrialization, and we had printing press, we had telephones back then. And because of that, maybe this information or some ideologies can be transferred from one location to another. Maybe that was what happened in Europe. Maybe socialist, communist ideologies was transferred from German. I think Marx invented capitalism. Marx was German. So all these ideologies pertaining to socialism, communism was transferred from German to other countries in Europe through the press, through other forms of communication. Oh, Marx's ideas on why we need to replace capitalism with something else, he deemed better, like the communist society or the socialist society. He deemed those societies as better. Questions so far? Okay. What is the meaning of alienation? It wasn't covered in chapter 1. You need to know this for your exam. Read that on the board. So, alienation happens when individuals are separated from their society, their work, or their identity. And there are 3 kinds of alienation. The first kind is what we call alienation from the labor. And who has a part-time job here? Okay, do you care to tell me what you do?
Sales associate.
Okay.
In the hospital.
Okay. What about you?
I'm a CNA at the hospital.
Okay. Do you see the big picture of why you are doing what you are doing? Or you are just getting paid and you have to pay tuition? You have to pay for your expenses. Do you see the big picture of what you are doing? So, if you see the picture of what you are doing, you are not alienated from your work, from your identity. Some work at the hospital, and some work in the hockey field, and some work as sales associate. And you see the big picture. You know that you are making the patient's life easier and better. And you know that you are making the place clean to make athletes' life maybe better in some ways when they practice or when they have a game. And maybe you are helping your employer making more profits, generating profits. That's the product of your labor. So if you see the big picture, then you are not alienated from the product of your labor. And if you see the meaning of all these little things, the processes that are involved in your work, of why you are doing certain things in your different jobs, then you are not alienated from the process of your labor. And do you face competition at work, ladies? Or you don't work with people, you don't face competition, your colleagues are nice? Wow, good for you. You are not alienated from your employees, from others. You don't face competition. And alienation from oneself means alienated from our true identity. We lose our identity when we just go in, day out to work. We clock in and clock out to work. We don't know why we are there. That's alienation from oneself. So I think I'm at the stopping